I've pretty much spoken every single OIS meeting, and this time I wanted to do something different, and I'm glad that Ike was amenable to this, really to talk a little bit about, not so much about our product and technology, which we've seen now multiple times, and actually let the data speak about that on Saturday when it will be disclosed. But I really wanted to take a little bit of time for retrospection. It's true, we've been at it now for 10 years on the industry side, on the regulatory side, on the clinical side, with a real community and ecosystem of clinicians. And I think it's a good time to really see what happened, how we've evolved, and where we are, because we are at an inflection point, and it's a good time for retrospection that can inform the next wave of innovation. Because for sure, the current companies are definitely driving the current wave, but in that field, you have to think about 10 years or more ahead. These are my disclosures, and to me, it's really fascinating when I look back. Very often in ophthalmology, whether it's on the therapeutic side or not, we've seen a lot of technologies trickle down from other fields. And when I look back at all of the innovation in MIGS, it's actually a trickle down from interventional cardiology and in general stent technology. So there is really nothing new about stents. Stents have been around for a long time, except that they haven't been around in the field of ophthalmology. And I think MIGS is the first wave of stent technology coming into ophthalmology, and it's only natural, and it's only right that it happens in a disease like glaucoma, where fluidics and outflow is really something that's amenable to this type of technology. It is really great to be a clinician today. If you look before 2000, and we've seen that multiple times, trabs and tubes were the only options to us glaucoma specialists. 2010, and in over the last few years, we've seen actually a huge expansion in those technologies, mainly driven by a lot of the people that we see today. And when we even look further today and beyond, there's going to be a lot more technology. So this is great for patients. It's great for clinicians. In fact, at UCSF, we have a lot more residents now going into glaucoma fellowship because of that, because they see that therapeutic area really growing in the future. So the MIGS landscape, 10 years later, we've seen that innovation has finally culminated. We see an inflection point. And MIGS is establishing a new frontier in surgical glaucoma. And this transformative innovation has been tremendous, but it didn't start so easy. So the question is, what really enabled us to come here? And I want to talk about the regulatory side today, because this, more than anything, plays in the validation of technology. And more so today than 10 or 20 years ago, we have to subscribe to level 1 clinical evidence and work through the regulatory process to get those patients, those technologies to patients, because they ought to be validated in a meaningful way. And no longer is enough to do 20 cases or some sort of a cohort with some case series and a registry in Europe and claim that you're actually doing what you're doing until you validate the technologies accordingly. And I want to see how and go really through what it takes and what we've done over the years. Now, the beginnings of the MIGS PMA, and we heard Chris talk about that with Glaukos leading the way with iStent. We can see that the first MIGS PMA study started in 2005 and completed in 2010. Then we saw the first MIGS approval of the iStent technology in 2012. And now we have the second MIGS PMA study from Transcend that also started about 2009 and completed in 2015. And for everybody who is mathematically inclined, and I know there's a lot of us now paying attention to math during the elections, but you can see that it just takes about 6 years or 7 years to complete a trial. No matter what resources you throw at this, it's a pretty involved process. And this is the process of the PMA. So the process has evolved too, and I think one of the main reasons why we're so successful at bringing that innovation to patients is because the process on the regulatory side has become a lot more predictable. And it has changed. It has evolved as we and the regulators have learned about technology. And you can see several key things that have changed. Number one, change in the size of a recommended PMA validation trial, change in the recommended endpoints, and change in the clinical trial methodology. And I'll briefly just show here, for example, the iStent trial versus the COMPASS study that you can see trials now of 500 plus patients. This is the new reality for validation, it will require a lot more patients to prove out and control the trial at the appropriate level. Also, the endpoints have evolved. Many of the studies have now 24-month endpoints, although the FDA in their guidance says that a 12-month endpoint can be justified, again, clinically. And we also need a safety follow-up of 24 months. And that's all actually pretty well developed and pretty well explained in the FDA guidance, which now makes it easier, more predictable for companies to actually follow the path. So there's been a lot of work from everybody, the FDA, the workshops, and the companies themselves. And a couple of pearls from the Transcend regulatory crypt. You can see that it took about 16 versions of the COMPASS protocol until we nailed it down during that process. So it's a constant work with an interaction with the FDA. It took 7+ years of exchange with the FDA through the whole process, and that continues. And also, when I looked back, it took 7,000 pages of correspondence and submissions. So I just wanted to give that flavor to everybody that's entering the space, to know that bottom line is we need level 1 evidence to be competitive, and the data has to speak for itself, and there is a very clear world out there, which it used to be a 510K world for glaucoma devices. That is changing, particularly if people want to develop technologies for the non-refractory population. And I think we're now entering the age of the PMAs. As technology goes beyond the refractory stage, we're looking at a lot more PMAs. And the good and the bad is that there is a lot of guidance and a lot of established criteria that weren't there when we launched the very initial efforts. And I think that's really good for innovation, because when you have a predictable path, it's easy to be followed, and people know exactly what they need to invest and how to validate the technology. So thank you very much.